Comcast is committed to bringing access to the internet to all Americans, including rural communities across the country, like Sussex County, Delaware.
We were being left behind. Everybody around us seemed to have internet, but we did not. High-speed internet is one of those good things that we needed to help us move our farming, our small businesses, our recreation forward.
Learn more about how we're bringing our next-generation network to more people across the country at ComcastCorporation.com/investment in America.
Once upon a mundane morning, Barb's day got busy without warning. A realtor in need of an open house sign. No, 50 of them, and designed before 9.
My head hurts.
Any mighty tools to help with his plight?
Aha!
Barb made her move. She opened Canva and got in the groove.
Bulk creating Canva sheets. Create 50 signs fit for suburban streets.
Done in a click, all complete.
Sweet!
Now, imagine what your dreams can become when you put imagination to work at Canva.com.
Saturday presents, in the red corner, the undisputed, undefeated Weed Whacker Guy. Champion of hurling grass and pollen everywhere. And in the blue corner, the challenger, extra strength Saturday. Eye drops that work all day to prevent the release of histamines that cause itchy allergy eyes. And the winner by knockout is Saturday. Saturday, bring it on.
At the Musial with Alan and Daniel, we'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. Everyone come gather round, listen to your favorite sound. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We'll talk the games and all the rest, about the team that we love best. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We're gonna talk about the Cardinals all night long.
Good morning and welcome into another edition of Meet Me at Musial. I'm your host, Daniel Shoptaw at C70. With me, as always, Alan Medlock, a Medlock One. It is still a quiet period for the Cardinals, but the baseball playoffs are going on. And Alan, it's been an interesting playoff run, I think, so far. I think there's been a lot of storylines and some stuff that's gone on, but I mean, we now have our first World Series participant, and it's pretty much what everybody thought.
Yeah, it's been a good playoff. It's been a lot of fun. Maybe, I don't know necessarily some surprises. I don't know. We can't remember if we said it on the show last week or if we said it before the show when we were doing some prep work, but you know, you could tell even with the Brewers leading the National League in wins and all the things that come with that, their style of play, they've been the feel-good story essentially. The minute that the Dodgers got through on a throwing error, it was just that it reminded me a lot of the Yankees juggernauts back in the 90s and when things just went their way. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, that's the one get out of jail free card that they will take and run with. So there's really not a lot of surprise. I'm sorry. Yeah. Really not a lot of surprise on that end for me that they made it. The American League has been a whole lot of fun to watch. That's been a pretty evenly matched series. You go in and you see Seattle win the first two in Toronto, and you think, mm-hmm. well, this could be a shoe-in as well, but that's turned out to be a darn good series. Last night was a lot of excitement in that game, and it gets me the several things are a negative about a Dodger sweep, but one being there would be no baseball on a Saturday, so we have to wait on a Sunday now for Game 6 in Toronto. But overall, I feel like the playoffs have been exciting and fun to watch.
Yeah, I think you're right on the American League. You know, you saw Seattle just go in and just pound on Toronto in Toronto, and you like, wow, what's going on here? And then, then Toronto returned the favor, and then it turned into, like you said, last night was kind of that pivotal game that turned out to be quite an interesting one. And Seattle goes into Toronto, but I think Toronto still feels pretty good, right? I mean, you get two games at home, and even though Seattle just won 2 games in Toronto, you got to feel like you're going to be able to do that on your home field, and whether they will or not, different story. But I think they'd much rather be in this situation than not playing at all.
Sure, absolutely, and you never know. I mean, it's both of them seem to have pitching lined up. Seattle's in one of those situations too, where they would probably say their number one has been out and then threw in relief the other night. So it's funny how everything lines up. I don't know if Milwaukee started a true starter almost the whole playoff series. It was just it's the way that things are now. I actually really enjoy talking to the high school kids about what used to be. Because you and I growing up, the ace went 1-4-7.
Yeah.
And you figured it out the rest of the way. But it was always a starter, and you try to get as many innings out of them as possible. But anymore, it's funny how that works out, and it's still surprising that we don't see more offense that we do.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know if you wanted to draw conclusions from a series, which I don't think you should in this regard. I mean, the Dodgers used traditional starters, and they were good, and Milwaukee did the opener and, didn't have a starter announced until like 2 minutes before the game started and things like that. And they got beat. And again, I don't think you draw necessary conclusions. I think there's reasons for that. But I think it just proves also, as always has, right? If you've got good pitching, good starting pitching, you're probably going to win. And I don't know that anybody saw it coming like this. But I mean, the Brewers, I mean, when we're watching this, the Brewers had 9 hits in the first 2 games. They didn't score multiple runs in any of the games. And, I know Quinn online, Quinn SDL Cards on Twitter, put out that he had it lined up. Other people had it as well, that, they scored less runs and hit less than the Cardinals did in the 19 NLCS. And we all remember how bad that one was.
Yeah.
I just, going into a series and just getting pretty much completely, handled in all facets is tough, especially when it's a series where, you win, you go to the World Series, and it just shows the gap between what Milwaukee was and then, which, I mean, to some degree, plays out well over the regular season, but may not
Yes.
play well in a short series.
Yeah. That's very extremely well put. Because I throughout the whole playoff, it never seemed to get on track for them, where it was easy for LA. And I think it's just because you have the historically good playoff performers for the Dodgers, and they've been there. It's one of those that you're right. I mean, their blueprint for how to get through playoff series worked a heck of a lot better than Milwaukee's to get through 162 games, and both admirable. But in a situation where there's only one champion every year, it bodes well for LA in a situation like that, and you do kind of wonder that. I mean, what else can the Brewers do? It's one of those. They won all those games. Murphy, everything he touched turned to gold this year. A decent roster, one of those. I mean, it's one of those. I don't know what much more they could do outside of going to get a big time starter, which is out of their MO, and it leads more to the haves and have nots. I mean, I know that ultimately, I know that I think it was Passon that made the article that, hey, this is one of those series that's probably going to lead to a work stoppage more than anything, and he may not be wrong.
And I mean, I get that, but
I don't necessarily agree with it either, but you're right.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've seen a lot of people talk about that, and there is something to that. I was talking to a Brewers fan last night, and he was complaining about the payroll disparity, and there is something to that. Obviously, I mean, they've got those players, but then you look, and the Mets had the highest payroll of the year, and they didn't even make the playoffs. The Yankees have a high payroll, and they're sitting at home. I mean, it's high payroll, and it's smart ownership and a smart management of the players. And when you put those two together, I know when Moneyball came out, and I think I said this before, I always felt like this was going to work real well until a big market got a smart guy, and then they could do, the same things that, the small markets were doing, but at a higher, scale.
Sure.
And that's pretty much what they've turned out to do in Los Angeles.
Well, and that's we've had these conversations too, and you're right. I was going to follow up that point as
Yeah.
well. You see a lot of high payrolls that are at home right now, and you see that more often than not. And then
Right.
you have the Andrew Friedmans of the world that do this and go and know what they're doing and change the entire culture. And now it's it's fun to watch, but they're the bad guy because they're able to. Where I felt like you had a good point about this a few years ago. A team like the Dodgers, where we argue that the Cardinals could be in this situation, but they would never be in this situation with Mo.
Right.
The issue with the Dodgers are they have the money to fix their flaws, or they have the money to gamble a little bit more than other teams do.
Mhm.
On some of those moves that your Milwaukee's, your St. Louis, and just central teams, so to speak, from the outside looking in, don't have that issue. Now, I think we can argue that every team does if they do it right, but here we are, and you have that black cloud looming, regardless of whoever wins this.
Yeah. And it also helps when you have a legendary talent on your team. And
Mhm.
granted, the Dodgers have been able to get that talent because they were able to give him $1 billion in creative ways.
Sure.
Um, I always cringe a little bit when people start, throwing around greatest tags, because I always feel like there's some recency bias and all this kind of stuff.
Sure.
But it's really, really hard not to see, to say, and it's so weird to think that Shohei Ohtani is the greatest overall player to play the game, because when you can go out in a game and hit 3 home runs and strike out, 10 batters over 6 innings, I mean, nobody does that.
No. And it is, and let me apologize. My allergies are kicking me today because
Don't worry about
I did a lot of mowing in our fields yesterday. The
It's the off season for us too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The how do I put this? And this not in a one game scenario. I hope that everybody understands that this is in a vacuum, not necessarily, but both of the things he did last night were multi-million-dollar contract player type deals. You know what I'm saying? If he didn't,
Right.
let's just say what he did on the mound last night was enough to be like, man, he's worth his weight in gold. And then to hit 3 home runs, you're just like in a clinching series game, you're just like, man, he's worth his weight in gold with the bat. To combine those two, it says a lot, because I feel the exact same way you do. I'm just like, these are knee-jerk reactions a lot of time. But then you look and you're like, if you would have said this would have happened 20 years ago, I'd have laughed at you. You know what I mean? About somebody that's able to do this. And I remember being skeptical of his ability to do it when he was coming over inside with the Angels.
Right.
I was like, I just don't know if he'll ever live up to the hype, but he definitely has. And last night was very impressive. I mean, it's one of those, it's almost hard to wrap your head around a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it was amazing when we watched Albert hit 3 home runs in the
Yes.
playoffs or the World Series. I mean, that was rare enough. I mean, they had a couple since then, but to see that basically out of your pitcher is incredible. And I agree with you. I honestly thought by now that he would have had to pick, right? That he wouldn't have been able to pitch as well against the majors, or the routines wouldn't have worked, or whatever. It's been, I mean, I think right now the Dodgers would say that's been, you're right, worth every penny. And they're the favorites going in this. I mean, to repeat for the first, I think it's first repeat. Is this the first repeat?
It's the Yankees.
Since the Yankees in '96 and
Yep.
all that run. I mean, that's been a while, and I think that's one of the things. People talk about, and we're probably going to hear more about salary caps, and they talk about the way the NFL and the NBA are, but those leagues, at least, and I don't follow them as much, but it feels to me like they've got they get the dynasties going, right? I mean, they get a team that goes to 4 and wins 3, and then they may fall off and be nothing, but they have a lot less variety at the top than we have seen in baseball over the past 25 years.
Yes. The it's funny that it's been 25 years when I feel like this has been a dynasty in LA, because what have they won? 9 of 10 division titles?
Oh, I think it's like 12 or 13 or something
Oh,
like
is it
that.
that high
It's
now? But
long. It's
yeah, I mean,
long.
if you think about it, I mean that's winning more than that's almost, that's almost 75-80% of the 25-year gap that the
Yeah.
Yankees have done it. So it's really surprising that I thought about it last night because I was thinking, well, their first win was 20 in the shortened season, and then of course they won last year. So it all makes sense, and it leads a lot to the parity of it. But yeah, you're right. I mean, there's a part of me now that's impressed. That is impressed with what they've done. And on another level, I kind of get to see a lot of these guys that come through Tulsa,
Yeah.
and that's another element to it. I mean, I want to say, hey, look, a lot of these guys are so homegrown and good and all that, and then we talk about to go back on the conversation we had just a little bit ago of things that some of the mid markets and whatnot can't do, and this is without looking at any reference pages or anything like that. But here's what's interesting about the Dodgers. Game one of the league championship series was a gem pitched by Snell. Game two was a gem pitched by Yamamoto.
Yep.
Game three was started by Glasnow, and last night was started by Ohtani. Those are 4 big arms, and their prized offseason arm is now their multi-inning closer. And that's smart money spent. And it's, when you look at it, you're just like, man, it's just right now. I mean, yeah, their lineup's loaded. You have your Peralta, your Ohtani, your Betts, who had this kind of a down year for him, but you have your also your money pieces in your Muncies, your Hernandez, your Will Smiths. It's funny, that lineup. It seems like when the money's on the line, everybody performs well. And I think that may be indicative of what we were talking about with the Yankees, because I felt like a lot of the same thing. I felt like those Yankees runs were, yeah, they were led by great players, but they made legends as well, just because of how well put together they were.
Yeah, I mean, and anytime you get a lot of chances at the postseason stage, people are going to remember those names more than anything. But yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it has to be something more than money. It has to have a culture. It has to have. I mean, I don't know if Dave Roberts is, like some sort of legendary manager, but he seems to be able to at least, manage his team, right? He's able to get the most out of his players, and there doesn't seem to ever be, conflict or huge issues out there in LA, unlike some other big markets. And so there's some of that too. I mean, there's a blend. Obviously, you get a huge advantage when you can buy really good players, and I and I don't know what the CBA is going to look like when we see that, but and I'm sure that will be a major sticking point. But I don't think we're necessarily on the cusp of the Dodgers being 5-time world champion, 5 in a row or anything like that. But that's only, I mean, to some degree, that's only because the playoffs are the way they are, right? I mean, the Dodgers have been there and been beaten by lesser teams in the past. The playoffs are random, and they could be too. I mean, I hate to say either Toronto or Seattle is a lesser team than the Dodgers, but when you look at their rosters, I mean, they're very good, very talented teams. But if you were just picking, I mean, I think the Dodgers are the favorite, right?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and now they get to rest their arms and have multiple that can throw at you, and where Seattle's going to have to throw, well, I say Seattle, but whoever is going to have to throw everybody to get there. And
Right.
a lot of times, I know sometimes those don't play out how we expect them to play. But you have a feeling that LA's playing with house money right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it can change. We think about 2006. The Tigers had a chance to rest, and the Cardinals had to really fight through
Yeah.
the championship series, and they won in 5. So it can happen. I don't know that I would. I don't know who I would pick in the series. I know who everybody's rooting for, and I agree. I mean, either Seattle and Toronto is an absolutely great story, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Seattle's never been to the World Series. Toronto hasn't been since the early 90s. It's, I mean, Toronto's got a whole nation behind it.
Yeah.
Plus most of most of America.
Well, they definitely will here in a week if that's how
Yeah,
it goes.
exactly.
Well,
Um,
coming into this, I wanted to see a Milwaukee Seattle World Series
mm,
just because of the Seattle, stake in both teams, and
right.
neither of them had ever done it, and
Right.
I was like, I wanted to see something new a little bit. Now you just want to see somebody that can beat LA potentially and enjoy it as a baseball fan. But my ultimate goal is to see as many games. If we're on the outside looking in, which has happened more often than not as a Cardinal fan recently, I want as many game 5s and game 7s as possible because I just think
Yeah.
the playoff format's the best, and
Yeah.
it's exciting to watch, and there is just a lot of romanticism that happens in baseball that I just don't feel happens in other sports. I mean, like Riley hitting the bomb to tie it last night. That
Mhm.
guy's probably getting one pitch that entire at bat, and look what he does, and it turns the game around. And you just don't see that in other sports as much, and so, as a baseball fan, and to be selfish, I just want it to go as long as possible.
Yeah. That being said, when the Cardinals are in it, I'm rooting for, 10-0 sweeps. I
Sure.
mean, I don't like the anxiety of postseason baseball sometimes because,
Well, yeah, no, I mean,
I just want them to just go in there and just win it. Yeah, but,
I've never gotten over the 3-1 lead and losing to the Giants
yeah.
because it's one of those I could pinpoint, pitches in that series in
Mhm.
12 that you're just like, oh my gosh, that changes everything. One of those,
Yeah.
but goes back to our point. I mean, that's why it's the best,
Yeah.
because things happen and
Right.
no, I mean, just to kind of ride it out as much as possible, and we'll see how it goes before free agency starts.
Yeah. I still remember the Carpenter Halliday game.
Oh
Just
man,
I mean, my kids
yeah,
were small, so they were in bed, so I had the TV down low, so I was standing basically right in front. I was standing the whole time, just pacing right in a little square right in front of it, and tweeting and just watching that, and being like, because every, it's 1-0.
yeah,
Every pitch, any pitch that Carpenter made, and in fact, there was that ninth inning, Utley hit a foul ball that as soon as he hit it, it was like, and
yeah.
it went foul, and we're like, "Okay." But, it wasn't. I mean, and you have Ryan Howard up at the very end, I mean, it never let up, and that's why I continue to say that that was the best playoff game in that series in that run. Even better than game 6. It was better as a baseball game because it was well played the whole way through, and it was just, nail biting.
Yes,
Um, 6 was more dramatic, probably, and obviously more memorable World Series and all that. But
but you're right.
yeah,
Le- go, Leading up to the drama, that was not a well played game in Game 6
mm-mm.
because
Drew Freeze let the ball hit his head.
that's what I was gonna say. That's the one that stands out to me. I mean, there was a lot of that where it was. I remember during the pandemic when we were at home and they were doing the replays of the games. I mentioned that to Amber, whoever listened. I said, the, "I'm glad that this was dramatic toward the end." I said because it was actually really terrible as a Cardinals fan early.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and it was, and there's a difference between even a good game that's more offensively focused versus, that nail biting pitcher's rule too. And some of that's personal preference, but, yeah, it was, and it's, one of these days we'll have more games like that, I'm sure, but, it does seem to be a while, and we can transition here a little bit. The Cardinals again have not done anything now. I mean, Chaim Bloom's been out a couple of little bits, but it's, and they're doing work behind the scenes, but it's playoffs. You can't be doing a whole lot. But there were a little bit of health announcements yesterday. Um, Ivan Herrera's had his elbow procedure. removed some bone spurs. We saw he put up a picture on Instagram of that earlier in the week. So, that surgery is done. We'll see how the recovery is. Brendan Donovan had a repair of a sports hernia, and Lars Nootbaar had his heels shaved down. Okay,
Yep.
I don't let's do Newt first, because I don't even really know what that is or why you would do it. And do you have any input on that?
Oh, yeah. It's in a past life when I was running around selling, orthopedic supplies, that would
Yeah.
happen. You would see a bunch of those, and it's basically just a bony protrusion on the back of your heel that
Mm,
a lot of times can be fixed with regular, you know over the counter type stuff, and or I say over the counter type stuff, non-surgical things. So
yeah.
I'm sure that he's been dealing with this quite a bit. So what it is they go is they open you up heel wise and shave down a bony prominence that's up the upper part of your heel that has been that's been bothersome for a while. So I wouldn't say that makes an excuse, but boy, in cleats, I would definitely see that would be a major issue. Um,
Yeah.
the recovery worries me a little bit
Mm,
because I mean that is I would think having both, I mean, you're going to be down for 6 weeks at at best. I would think, at least in a boot type measure, type
mhm.
situation. So, that you start looking at that, and that takes you basically to the what first of the year, so to speak. Well, I say that. I mean, through the holidays or through the winter meetings anyway.
Yeah.
And yeah, but that's one of those that there's not a lot that can go wrong in that situation
Right.
if that's something that concerns you as far as a trade. I say you, but of anybody as far as trade and whatnot. I'm sure that'll be used against them, but I don't think that's any major stumbling block.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it, and that's a good explanation. I appreciate that. And I think that, that is something you factor in, because he is possibility of trade, but, maybe it's also a situation where you can flip it around on him and say, look, part of why he was struggling
Yeah,
this year was he was dealing with that, and that's not gonna be an issue now. So, um, I don't know. I mean, will be interesting. And then it's not a bad thing for some of these guys. I don't know if Newt's one of those, but I think there's some guys that might need an enforced, 6 weeks off, that they can't do anything, just to, give them that rest and give them a chance to, you know, recover a little bit. I mean, I'm sure he's still doing some, upper weights or whatever, and maybe trying to swing a little bit without standing, just, but, have to take some time off. And I think this is the time to do it, right? I think most players, if they're going to take time off, it's like from right after the season until, December or so. So this hopefully won't set him back anything on what he's actually wanting to do for next year anyway.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
The
yeah,
go
go
ahead,
ahead.
go ahead. No, you're
Well,
good.
I was just gonna, if you got any more, dude, I was gonna shift to Donovan.
Yeah, go right
Um,
ahead. Yeah,
and again, all of these guys, it's always the Tommy Edman specter lingers over everybody, right? It's just like, are they really going to be ready, or is this going to turn into something that we never see them again? With Donovan having that sports hernia, it still makes you wonder. They took so long to put him on the injured list and all that. You wonder if, especially the way this season was, if they shouldn't have, you know, done this a little earlier. I guess I'm just a little bit surprised that if that's something that they thought they needed to do, and maybe it was something that was diagnosed later on, but if that was something that they had an idea of already, it probably could have been done, at the end of the season or
yeah.
before.
Well, and yeah, I thought that last night too. I was thinking, well, considering he didn't play much in
Right.
the last month, you're thinking, well, this could have probably been knocked out a little bit. But I don't. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would like. That's one of those fly in the wall deals. I'd like to know a little bit more. So
Mhm.
I don't know. Crazy.
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting to think. Okay, well, Donovan's down and Herrera's down and Newt Bar's down and Wynn's down. That's a good chunk of, of players that had to have some sort of medical intervention this offseason already. Hopefully there's not any more, but it's also interesting that, I guess I take that back. I was gonna say it's interesting that so many of those guys are on the trade market as well, but everybody is pretty much on the trade market. It really
Sure.
feels like, I think I was listening to Talking About Birds earlier, and they mentioned a Derek Gould chat, which I hadn't seen, but basically Gould was saying that they're fielding calls on pretty much everybody, that they don't want to trade. In the catcher situation was specifically is what we were looking at, is that they didn't necessarily want to trade Bernal or Crooks, but and even they were even listening on Ivan Herrera. I'm sure Ivan Herrera would take a lot more to get, and I'm sure they don't really want to trade him, but I think it's very interesting to know that I don't know that there's anybody off limits right now.
Sure. And that's, I mean, your gut reaction is that, does that bother you a little bit, or is it one of those that you're just like, hey, this is where we are, and you trust you trust the process to get better, no matter who it's going to be, that's moved out. Is that uh, how do you feel about it when you hear those?
I mean, it's not Mason Wynn. If so, other than that, if it's Mason
Agreed.
Wynn, it might change my mind. But
Yeah.
I think for the most part, even with Herrera, yeah, I think it's I think right now that Chaim Bloom has enough goodwill and credibility that we're like, okay, if he thinks that this is what needs to be done, if they need to trade, a very quality player in Herrera because of whatever reason, they think they can get a lot of talent back, or they think they've maxed out what Herrera can do, or whatever the case may be. I think we give him a lot more credit for that, and we say, okay, we'll see how it goes, than we would if Mo tried to do it, and we would be like, well, what's going on here? I mean, even though they might come at it in exactly the same way, right now, Chaim Bloom has the goodwill of the fans, and I don't know that anybody would be excited about that trade, but I think they would at least give him the benefit of the doubt on it.
Sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I just, I did think it was funny that Herrera's name was the first two. That was one of the first ones that you heard was, hey, there's interest out there, which we know there's going to be, but that
Mhm.
was that honestly you're listening to, you know, listening on everybody that's on the roster, and you're thinking, well, we can kind of circle back and think of the guys that we do think will probably be moved on, just because you can look at the contractual obligations and where that's running out and how they're not going to pay him anymore, and the roster glut that they're going to move a little bit. Those are the easy ones to look at. But should we change our mindset to the easy ones to look at? Maybe the whole roster right now, because it's a flawed roster, and we are who we are, and trust the process, because it may look quite a bit different, and truly may not be a situation where they do look to compete in a year, and that
Mhm.
that may mean a lot of different things, and it may mean the roster may look quite a bit different next year. But yeah, I'm curious to see how it plays out, and how much trust they have in what was going on before they took over, them being Cerfolio and
Mhm.
Bloom, and how how much how much of a positive outlook on some of the current roster players they have.
Yeah, yeah, and I think, again, Chaim Bloom's had a couple of years to really sit and think and know these players and know what they can do and know what other people think they can do. And um I think I think we're just at that spot where, we don't know what the front office's approach is gonna be, right? We had an idea of what Mo would do.
Yeah,
We kinda go into an offseason knowing, okay, well, we need to be looking at the Lance Lynn types, or, they're never gonna trade X, Y, or Z because, that would make sense, or, stuff like that. We had a template for how to expect Mo to behave, and we don't have that with Heimblin. We don't know what he's gonna do. We don't know. We've never been through this kind of rebuilding situation in St. Louis, so that we're not real familiar with either. I mean, it's not a let's sell everything for parts type of thing, and I don't, but it's gonna be, hey, maybe they don't value what Herrera like we
yeah,
think they do, or maybe they, because I mean, as I've heard, again, I think that they've had a lot of discussion on this on talking about birds, but the idea of if Hera doesn't catch, his bat is good, but is it worth the fact that he's pretty much taking up your DH spot? Because unless you trade Wilson and let him play first, or I don't know that you want him in the outfield all the time. I mean, that's one way to clear up this roster clutter, while also possibly the best way of bringing talent in. So, I'm not advocating for it. I don't think that that's a really great idea, and I'm really excited about seeing what Von Herrera could do for the Cardinals next year. But I can also understand that if that trade gets made, there could be reasons for it.
Yeah, that's the way that they approach things. That's kind of where I was going with that as well.
Mm-hmm.
We knew the blueprint, but we don't now. And it's
Yeah.
one of those to where you and I had spoken about this a lot of, hey, do you want to see selling high on a lot of these guys? And, where I would love to see your Burlesons, your Donovan, and everybody back.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's necessarily the case. And it's one of those to where everything that you just said made a whole lot of sense, because I'm thinking, that's a bat you could go, and you don't necessarily know his position, because are we convinced that it was the elbow that he couldn't throw anybody out? I mean, I don't know. I mean, he had to play the outfield last year, if that tells you anything. So, is the bat worth it? I mean, or is it worth it to what you can get back? I mean, those are some interesting questions, because you just don't know. I mean, and you don't know if Contreras is willing to move, and there's a lot of moving parts. I mean, I would assume that it's slow for us right now, but not necessarily so slow for the front office, which honestly gets my juices flowing a little bit. I mean, that's some exciting stuff, and we'll I'm excited to see the outcome.
How fast, basically the day after the World Series is over, things can start happening, right? I mean, you start extending contracts, options have to be decided on, things of that nature. And the Cardinals don't have a lot of that, but the transactions of baseball get started. How fast do you think it is before we start seeing some sort of roster change, whether it's, designating for assignment, whether it's a trade? Do you think that, Chaim Bloom comes out of the gate kind of running? Because it always felt like Mo always wanted to hang back, I mean, sometimes he'd
Yeah.
get out, if he tried to beat the market, like he did with the pitchers in, what was that, 23? But, or I guess it was the winter of 22. But even then it was, around Thanksgiving when all those guys signed, the Lynn and the Gibson and Gray. Do you see anything happening like before Thanksgiving? Or do you think this is a slow process that might, he's got to get the responses from other players. He's got to kind of slow play things.
Man, that's a great question. I had thought about that a little bit, but my gut says it'll be after the GM meetings in November, that they'll kind of maybe and that's without looking up anything. When's your 40-man deadline?
I think it's later on. I think it's
I was gonna say
it's closer to the winter meetings, because it's not at the winter meetings is when they do the Real 5 draft. So it's got to be before that.
Okay,
it might be in that GM meetings or a little after time period,
because that could be the first one where you see that where you can see kind of the makings of what we think they're going to be. It goes back to, I remember the last contract that I felt was the one that, I don't know how to say this, the one that you felt, hey, this was kind of against the grain a little bit of Mo, is when they came out openly and said they weren't going to bring back Wong. Is there that type of move right now on the roster? I'm not looking at, I mean, I don't have the roster up. I'm kind of kicked back and relaxed. I was trying to think, is there that kind of move that they could do right away?
No, I don't think so. I mean, no, because there's not options to be picked up. The only three players are Contreras, Gray, and Arenado, and we already know they're how they're going into this winter. And I think everybody else is under control enough that they don't have to decide. By the way, I looked it up. It looks like the qualifying offer deadline is 5 days after the World Series. But the non-tender deadline is November 21st. So that's then, right before Thanksgiving is when
Okay.
they have to try to tender or non-tender, which that maybe we'll definitely see some people, especially on the edges of the 40 man, probably get non-tendered by then.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I kind of wondered if there was just that one big move, but they obviously don't. I don't know. I could see the Cardinals being big players at the winter meetings this year. Something that I don't know if we've seen in a long time, and that could be
Mhm.
just because the Gray Contreras. I'm not so certain the Arenado's more of the name, but I don't know if he's going to carry the uh, the trade
Yeah.
power, I say, necessarily,
Right.
or headline power as the other two. I mean, it's one of those to where I'm fluid on these, just who I think probably. If you would have truth serum me last week, I would have said they probably all three come back, which I didn't know. I kind of thought that may be a slow process, but I could see there being a lot of movement by the winter meetings this year, just because everybody knows the market's open for them, and now if the reporting's true, there nothing's off the table.
Yeah. I'm interested, we saw that this week that Bregman opted out of his contract in Boston, and I wonder if those trade talks won't get
I wondered about that
readdressed.
as well. Yeah, I thought the
Um,
same thing.
yeah, and that now again, it's been a whole nother year. You're older, Arnoldo's not only a year older, but he's a year farther removed from a very solid year. So if you're wanting an offensive bat to try to replace Bregman, then I don't think Arnoldo's your guy. But if you want a fairly decent bat and still a really strong glove, you know, then they could talk. So I don't know. I think that's interesting. That may be
Well,
the
and
best spot for him.
one thing that I think that both Arenado and the Cardinals can do is be very, very patient on that, because I think that the Bregman play was completely to go out and get more money, and well, I guess it
Yeah.
always is, but um, with the when what the way that I look at it, when you see Devers' contract move, I think that Bregman saw that right away. Of hey, that I could have that contract next. One of those type situations,
Mm.
and stay there in Boston, or to see how much that price could be driven up by a Detroit and anybody that's potentially looking for a third baseman, meaning that the Cardinals can be really, really patient and go with whoever doesn't get him, type situation. So yeah, that's one of those things that I could see that one being. I could see the Arenado deal going long term. Being the last one, and to see how that plays out. But I would think that Contreras, and more importantly Gray, I think will be a name that's brought up quite a bit early.
Yeah. I do wonder. I agree with what you're saying there, and it makes sense on Arenado. But I wonder if Bloom, if you had his preference, would like to get that off the table first, just because
Yeah,
it's lingering over from last year and all that, and we saw it's kind of the focus for last year, and they didn't really do anything else, which I don't think they would have anyway, even if they traded him. But um, I have a feeling that he would like to get that off his plate early, but you're
sure.
right, it may be the smart play not to. So
Well, and honestly, all that being said, too, I was surprised they were so proactive about, hey, a buyout's not a possible, or well, he didn't say that.
yeah.
I will say that a release is not on the table.
Well,
One
which
of
is
those,
pretty much I mean, if the
the same
buyout would be,
thing.
I think, the
Yeah,
same thing. Yeah.
yeah, because honestly, you're right, because the DeWitts aren't going to buy anybody out, so to speak, in that situation. But yeah, that you're right. I mean, just because that feels like that's the move that I wouldn't say holding him back, but it would allow a lot of roster flexibility for that move to happen.
Well, and I think that if you make that move, maybe you don't make a different move. Maybe
Sure,
maybe Gorman stays if
that's
or even
exactly where I
though
was going with it.
Arenado's
Yeah,
gone. Yeah. But, again, like Blake was saying, they would be happy to have Arenado as a third baseman, and I think that's fair. I mean, his glove is still remarkably good. And his bat is, again, we'll see if the shoulder, getting a chance to rehab and all that kind of stuff is going to help him. I'm iffy on it. But he's still enough of something. If he wasn't getting paid $30 million, I don't think anybody would worry about it, right? I think,
Yeah.
if he was getting paid $10 million, everybody's like, "Hey, we're getting a pretty good deal." So if he can, if he's with the Cardinals, that's fine. But it probably does mean that, other people move, and that may not be the preference. And it may be, honestly, for Chaim Bloom, he might prefer to have Arenado stay and trade one of those other guys because they could bring back more value. But knowing what Arenado's preferences are, they're going to try to accommodate him.
Yeah. Yeah. I I would no. I mean, you're 100% spot on that, and I think that is. I think you're going to try to make everybody happy, and more important, I think the Cardinals are trying to do that for Arenado more so than anything because
Mhm.
they know what, and they have been completely open about what they're going to be in the short term. All that said, I mean, I do kind of wonder if everything that we've read about everybody being on the table, that anybody could be moved, that in a list of priorities, let's just say you take the three contracts out, being Contreras, Gray, and Arenado, that that they would prefer to move but may not. Um, where on that pecking list is Gorman after that? I mean, because I do kind of wonder if they're going to try to sell that power right away, seeing as how dominant it is in the playoffs, and maybe. I mean, I don't know if you're ever going to be able to sell high, but I do kind of wonder if he would be a guy that's going to move regardless, just because of the enticement of what he can be. Potentially, the one trick pony with the power, and that's what gets you through the playoffs type deal. I do wonder what the industry standard is for a guy like that, and whether he's going to move regardless, whether Arenado's out or not.
I don't know. I mean, if they both move, what are you doing? Are you playing Donovan at third? Do you think Weatherholt? I mean, I know he played a little bit of third in the minors. Do you think he gets the promotion?
Well, yes,
Um,
and I think that you could even do one. I think Weatherholt breaks with the club next year,
mhm.
and is going to. I think he's going to play somewhere. Uh, there's that, but I also think that in a situation in such a transitional year that you can start as a JC and just figure it out.
True. Yeah. I mean, that's very possible. I think there's enough. You're right, with enough depth of, and they're gonna have to trade probably a couple of these guys, right?
Yeah,
So that makes some sense. And you can figure it out. I don't know. It really depends on the organization's opinion on Gordon. I mean, I think a lot of us have seen it and we're frustrated because it's been, 4 or 5 years now, and it just hasn't clicked, and, we'd like to move on, but,
yeah,
a little bit of that is prospect fatigue to some degree. You get tired of the same guy, and, we you know, we also will will also complain if he goes somewhere and hits 40 bombs.
it's
So,
very true.
uh, I think so if they're looking at it the way we do, then yeah, I think they go ahead and try to move him. But if they look at it like, hey, somebody's gonna have to give us a good deal because we still think there's stuff in here, then I think he's probably, again, it's open to it, but I don't think it's necessarily like, a top priority. So and again, we're still trying to figure this front office out. So, and until they make some moves that we have, okay, this is what they value. This is what, this is how they look at things. It's kind of just, fumbling in the dark.
Yeah, yeah, 'cause you're right. I mean, you just really don't know anything, and it is a weird yet refreshing time right now. That where I think that we still have. I say all these things not to me. I mean, I'm not going to
Mhm.
try to pile on. I do think the message was stale with the last front office, and the energy that's being brought about by the new front office is nice. I mean, and we had talked about this. Communication and transparency is basically what anybody wants to see, and there's
Mhm.
going to be people that push back on those things, and that's the vocal crowd, and that's the ones you're going to hear. But as far as being up front, saying what the plans were, and the communication side of it, I mean, you got to give him an A at this point, because you see a lot of the front office out and about saying the things, and the transparency is going to have to come by the moves that we see made when moves can be made. So at this point, there's no reason to not have a little bit of energy and positive energy that is to what's going on. That being said, there's only so much they can say before playing their hands with other organizations, and I think that that's kind of that where we're at now. But obviously, they're fielding calls, and you trust Gould's reporting on those things because he's usually spot on. That things could get a little wild.
Yeah, very well, very well. And speaking of wild, I did not expect in 2025 that we would be talking about Mike Schilt. But this
Wow.
week has been an interesting one. Mike Schilt suddenly retires from San Diego, stating health reasons, which I completely believe to some degree. I mean, I believe that health is an issue for him for sure. But there was reporting after the fact that, the the Padres are about to have an intervention with him anyway because of the approach he had with his staff and even his bosses, and the fact that this was an issue that carried over from St. Louis, that led into his departure, the philosophical differences that we have referenced so many times, that it was also basically like some coaches said, it's either him or us.
Yes.
And I think we've heard bits and pieces and parts of this. We kind of knew that Mike Schilt was not necessarily the easiest guy to get along with. I don't think we've seen it quite so spelled out as we did this week.
Yeah, that one when he was out there became a time where I was like, kind of feel bad for the guy, but he went on his own terms. And then when the articles started coming out, you're like, that kind of makes some sense now. And that answers a lot of questions of, philosophical differences of, well, Mo kind of took the sword on this a little bit and didn't say anything. So someone else could get, he could stay in the, hopefully grow, then get another job. And I'm sure industry may have known that, but trust me, that was, all of this has added a somewhat, I don't know how to say this, entertaining element to him moving out of San Diego. Now, in the back of my mind, whenever he resigned, I was like, boy, they have a hard time keeping people out there.
That's true.
And that's was the first thing that I had kind of jumped to the conclusion. I was like, man, it's tough for them to keep people for such a good ball club. And then you realize that, could be the manager himself on this one.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of different reasons, I think, for people to leave, but you're right. Also, I've thought the same thing. There has been significant turnover under Preller out there, and I don't know that he's blameless in all this, right? I mean, that I think there have been talks about, maybe his communication skills or interactions with people isn't necessarily that great, and some of that's also the nature of his. The Padres are a team that can win 90 or lose 80. I mean, you just never. Even with the talent on the roster, you just never know exactly how they're going to come out it. But Mike Schilt has been in the playoffs every full year he's been a manager, so there's that. But I mean, I get the stresses of a manager life. There's no doubt. But when you add to that having those kind of interactions with people, I mean, that's going to eat on you as well, even if you don't really realize it. I mean, that just adding to that stress level of, and maybe that's how it's coming out, is berating people like that. But that can't be good for you all the way around. And give Mike Shell credit for realizing that his health and his mental well-being was better than getting paid to be a major league manager, even though this is a guy that spent his whole career just working his way up and then finally getting that shot. But it doesn't sound like he was blameless in this whole thing.
Sure. Yeah. I think that you can really draw the conclusions that things weren't great here. It being St. Louis, that where we didn't know that, and you can kind of see the same situation out there. And I think that there is a little bit of blame to go around, but I will say that it makes a whole lot of sense what happened in St. Louis now,
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
opposed to what it was of assistants trying to quit. And now, yeah, that bench coach job's kind of been a revolving door, and Marmal was kind of the only one to stay in it. And it says a lot. I remember when that move was made and you and I were talking about it, I said, this move feels like it's more for a Marmal type situation. And I mean, mainly it was, but
Mhm.
I think that there was some cracks in the facade a little bit.
Well, and it's interesting because, and as you say that, I remember that, but there was some indication, I think at the time, that, like you said, they did that because they thought Marmal was going to go to another organization because he was a managerial prospect.
Yeah.
Much like we've seen Skip Schumacher be that kind of guy and stuff like that. But you wonder if that had, now that you hear this, if he was one of the ones that said it's either him or me,
Yeah.
and they went with him. And I don't know that. I have no idea. I mean, I know Schultz was, very complimentary of Ollie when Ollie got the job, and but they also kind of expect that in the public. I have no idea. Um, and I have a feeling that for Mike Schilt, he never took it personally when he thought he was, he even said something about having hard, accountable conversations. And there's a room for accountability. There's also ways to do it without, having people feel like they're,
Sure.
being beaten up.
Yeah.
I'm sure that in his mind, it's not as, it wasn't personal, but it probably came across that way to some of these guys. Because even in the story, even in the article out of San Diego, these coaches are like, yeah, he made me better, but they didn't really care for the way he did it. I mean, and I get that, and I mean, think there's probably better ways of dealing with people than berating them all the time for mistakes.
Yeah. That's tough. I mean, because I mean, I was a fan and thought that
Hmm.
and not necessarily saying I won, but that was a move that I really liked and liked what Schilt brought. But yeah, it's been a weird week when it came to that, because when I saw the change, I was like, man, this is strange. And
Hmm.
when you read more into it, it's incredibly strange.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's gonna be. I mean, it is interesting to see. I mean, I want to say I may be wrong very much because I didn't look it up, but if I have this feeling like this would be like the sixth manager that AJ Preller gets to hire, and there's some. I think it was him there. I may be thinking of a different organization, but there was some idea of he might not get to hire this one.
Yeah,
That he's only got like a year left on his control. He won't be the only decision maker on this, which is fascinating as well, right? I mean, you know, there's a little bit of palace intrigue there as well, and that's always a lot of fun to watch when it's not your team. Um, but yeah, I did not expect to be talking about Mike Schilt this week,
yeah,
but it is what it is. It's I just anytime you bring up Mike Schilt, and especially when he left, I keep you have Alex Reyes flashbacks, and it's just it's also sad that Alex Reyes never threw another pitch in the major leagues after that.
yeah, yeah. That's another one for me. That's it was funny because I was listening to the Gas House Gang the other night,
Mhm.
and they were talking about when they were holed up in Milwaukee, for
Yeah,
that week.
yeah.
They're talking about the haunted hotel and and all kinds of stuff like that. And they brought up Carlos Martinez and a lot of those names that I thought, man, I remember thinking it's going to be a mistake to move him. It's going to be a mistake to move Reyes. And by the end of it, you're just like, well, that is
Mhm.
just kind of the way baseball goes. And they never ended up anywhere else. It's kind of
Yep.
strange.
Well, Carlos went up in San Francisco, but didn't. I don't know that he ever made. Did he make it back to the majors?
I don't for some reason I want to say no, but I may be wrong.
Um, for it may not have. He may have only pitched in their minor league. And I'm trying to do this search real quick. Um, but I feel like he got a little bit of time in San Francisco. And I know I always fact checked other podcasts. I know other people are doing it here. No, they did not. He did not. He never made it back to San Francisco. So yeah, his last pitches were in St. Louis. Yeah, it is kind of crazy. I mean, and that's the thing. Maybe we need to think about this year also. When we're talking about these trades this off season, even when it looks like even if Havon Herrera gets moved, and we're like, the possibilities. Look at how good this guy is. In 2 years he might not be. It may not be anything. I mean, I think that we would have wished they would have moved Alex Reyes and Carlos Martinez when they had value versus what we saw. Now, again, the Cardinals were in a different situation there. They were actually contending and going to the playoffs and stuff like that. So you're not really thinking about it. But I think we just have to realize that, sometimes, a lot of baseball players don't have 10 or 15-year careers. And if you can move them at the height of their, value, I think especially somebody like, compared to Donovan or something this offseason may be that case, then maybe you should, because you never know where they're going to be in just another year or two.
Yeah. And that's it. Very, very true. And, a lot of times I say that, but a lot of the moves you completely understand and you just deal with the outcome of whatever it is. Mm-hmm. So that's, it's tough and adds some intrigue to what we're going to see when the playoffs are over.
Yeah. Brain Tricky's famous line is, he'd rather trade a player a year too early than a year too late. And I'm going to be very interested to see if this front office, kind of goes with that.
Yeah.
Mo was obviously not of that. His was, never trade them, but definitely never was, a year too early. So that will be interesting. And we will talk about that when the news start happening. It looks like Alan and I will probably be out next week, so there won't be a show. We'll probably be back early part of November after the World Series, and we can start seeing maybe some activity. But until then, for Alan, I'm Daniel. Good night.
Is at 4 home runs this postseason. He's swinging for number 5 right there, and it's a full count.
The Rangers a strike away from winning it in both the 9th and 10th innings. 2 strikes on Freese, 2 strikes on Berkman.
Hits it in the air to center. We will see you tomorrow night.